I pressed my ear against the bedroom door and heard my own daughter say the words that broke me. "He's dead weight, Nathan. Dead weight. I want him out before his hospital bills show up on our doorstep." She didn't know I was standing right there. She also didn't know about the $15 million I'd been hiding for 6 years. Or the bridge I was building in her mother's name. The same bridge she'd been secretly trying to profit from. What my daughter did next made the betrayal even worse. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it started. Earlier that same day, 6 hours before I heard those words through that door, I was sitting in a leather chair in Dr. Whitfield's office on the 3rd floor of the Medical University building in downtown Charleston, watching him study my chart like it contained bad news he didn't want to deliver. The room smelled like hand sanitizer and old carpet. Through the window behind his desk, I could see the steeple of St. Michael's Church, white against the October sky. And below it, the rooftops of the old city stretching toward the harbor. I'd built roads through half those neighborhoods, bridges across the creeks and marshes that stitched this city together. 40 years of my life poured into concrete and steel, and now I was sitting here waiting for a man in a white coat to tell me how much time I had left. Dr. Whitfield set the chart down and folded his hands. "Henry, I'm going to be straightforward with you. I'd appreciate that. Your echocardiogram shows reduced ejection fraction. Combined with the fluid retention and the shortness of breath you've been experiencing, we're looking at congestive heart failure. Stage 2. The words landed in the room like stones dropped into still water. Congestive heart failure. I'd heard those words before. Louise's father had died of the same thing. Back in 1992. Wheezing in a hospital bed in Somerville, while the nurses adjusted his oxygen. What does that mean in plain English? It means your heart isn't pumping as efficiently as it should. The good news is, Stage 2 is manageable. Medication, lifestyle changes, regular monitoring. With proper care, you're looking at 15 to 20 years. 15 to 20 years. I was 65. That put me somewhere between 80 and 85 if I played my cards right. It wasn't a death sentence, more like a road map with some detours marked in red. And without proper care, he paused just long enough to tell me everything. "Let's focus on the proper care." He wrote prescriptions, handed me pamphlets, scheduled follow-ups. I nodded at all the right moments, asked the questions a responsible patient asks. But my mind was already somewhere else. Somewhere on the other side of the Ravenel Bridge, in a 4-bedroom colonial in Mount Pleasant where my daughter and her husband were waiting for me to come home and tell them what the doctor said. I knew, sitting there with the diagnosis folder in my hands, exactly how Meredith would react, not because I wanted to think the worst of my own child, but because I'd spent 3 years watching her face every time money came up in conversation. I'd seen the way her eyes changed, the quick calculation behind the concern, the mental arithmetic she thought I couldn't see. I thanked Dr. Whitfield, shook his hand, and walked out into the October air. Charleston, in fall, is something people write songs about. The live oaks along Calhoun Street were just starting to turn, gold creeping into the edges of their leaves. Spanish moss hung from the branches like old lace, swaying in a breeze that carried salt and pluff mud from the harbor. I climbed into my truck, a 2014 Ford F-150 with 160,000 miles on it. Nothing flashy, nothing that would make anyone look twice. I set the diagnosis folder on the passenger seat and pulled out onto the road. The drive from downtown to Mount Pleasant takes you across the Arthur Ravenel Jr. Bridge, one of the longest cable-stayed bridges in the Western Hemisphere. I'd worked on the foundation surveys for the original bridge back in the 80s, before Cooper River got its upgrade. Every time I crossed it, I thought about the engineering, the tension cables, the way the whole structure was designed to flex without breaking. Bridges were like that. They had to be strong enough to hold weight, but flexible enough to absorb the shocks. I wondered, driving across that bridge with the late afternoon sun turning the Cooper River into liquid copper, if my family had any flexibility left. 3 years I'd lived in Meredith's house. 3 years of paying $3,000 a month in cash, helping with the kids, keeping quiet in the guest bedroom that used to be Nathan's home office. 3 years of watching my daughter become someone I didn't recognize. Someone Louise wouldn't have recognized either. Louise. My wife. My compass. Dead 4 years now, taken by pancreatic cancer that moved so fast we barely had time to say goodbye. She'd fought for 11 months. 11 months of chemo and hope and hospital rooms that smelled like bleach and fear. And when she died, she took a piece of me with her that I still haven't gotten back. Meredith called 2 weeks after the funeral. "Come stay with us, Dad. The kids would love having you around. Just until you figure out what's next." I said yes. And I made a decision I've never told anyone about. I wouldn't tell them about the money. Not the real money. Not the 15 million sitting in accounts and investments they'd never thought to ask about. I wanted to see something. I wanted to see if my daughter loved me for me, or for what she thought she'd inherit. It was a test. A test I prayed she would pass. I turned off the Ravenel Bridge and headed into Mount Pleasant, past the shopping centers and the new construction, and the endless rows of low-country-style homes with their wide porches and hurricane shutters. Meredith's neighborhood sat behind a gated entrance with a fountain that ran year-round, even during the droughts when the rest of Charleston was on water restrictions. I pulled into the driveway beside Meredith's white BMW, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment with my hands on the wheel. The house looked the same as always. Colonial style. Cream siding. Black shutters. A front door painted Charleston green. The lawn was immaculate. Meredith hired a service. I grabbed the folder and headed inside. The smell hit me first. Thyme and garlic butter. Something roasting in the oven. Ellie's backpack was dumped at the bottom of the stairs. One sneaker kicked off in the entryway. From somewhere upstairs, I could hear James making explosion sounds, narrating some imaginary battle that apparently involved every toy he owned. Normal. Domestic. Safe. I set my keys on the hall table and walked toward the kitchen. Meredith's voice came from around the corner, sharp and efficient, the way she talked when she was multitasking. "Dad? That you?" "Yeah." I turned the corner into the kitchen. She was standing at the island, chopping vegetables with precise, mechanical strokes. Didn't look up. Her laptop was open beside the cutting board, a spreadsheet glowing on the screen. "So how'd the appointment go?" I set the folder on the counter, right next to her laptop. Close enough that she couldn't ignore it. "Not great." That got her attention. Meredith's knife paused mid-cut. She glanced at the folder, then at me, her eyes moving between the two like she was deciding which one mattered more. "What did he say?" "Congestive heart failure. Stage 2. He wants me on new medication. Some lifestyle changes." For a moment, something flickered across her face. Concern, maybe. Or something else. It was there, and gone, before I could name it, like a shadow, passing behind glass. "Well," she said, setting the knife down carefully. "This complicates things. Not are you scared, Dad? Not what can we do? Not come sit down. Let me make you some tea. Let's talk about this. This complicates things. Like I'd just told her the roof was leaking or the dishwasher was broken. A problem to be managed. An inconvenience to be calculated. "Is it genetic?" she asked, picking the knife back up. "Should I get checked?" He didn't say. "I can ask." "You should." She went back to chopping, her strokes faster now, sharper. "Well, you'll just have to follow doctor's orders, I guess. Stay on top of the medication." Behind her, the sliding door opened and Nathan came in from the backyard, wiping his hands on his khaki shorts. He'd been cleaning the pool filter. A Saturday chore he somehow never managed to finish before dark. Nathan was like that. Always almost done with something. "Hey, Henry." He opened the fridge, pulled out a beer. Didn't offer me one. "Everything okay?" Meredith answered before I could. "Dad's got a heart thing. Congestive failure. Stage 2. He'll be fine if he takes his pills." She said it the way you'd summarize a weather report. Chance of rain. Bring an umbrella. Nathan's face went through a quick series of expressions, like a man flipping through cue cards trying to find the right one. Concern. Uncertainty. The careful blankness of someone who wasn't sure what emotion his wife expected him to perform. Oh wow. I'm sorry, man. That's rough. It's manageable, I said. Good. Yeah, good. He took a long pull of his beer and stared at the backyard through the sliding door. Conversation over. Meredith called toward the stairs. Kids' dinner in 5. We ate at the table like we always did. Meredith at one end, Nathan at the other. Me across from the children. The roasted chicken was good. Meredith was an excellent cook when she wanted to be, which was mostly when she was stressed. Cooking gave her something to control. James chattered about his day. Something about a frog he'd found near the playground, and how his friend Marcus said frogs could breathe through their skin, which James thought was both cool and gross. He demonstrated by holding his breath until his face turned pink. Ellie was quieter. She sat with her fork resting against her plate, watching me the way she sometimes did, with those big, serious eyes that saw too much for a 10-year-old. Grandpa? Yeah, sweetheart. Are you going to be okay? The table went still. Meredith's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Nathan studied his chicken with sudden intensity. I'm going to be just fine, Ellie, I said, and I made myself smile because she needed it. Just got to take better care of myself, that's all. You promise? I promise. She held my eyes for a moment, searching for something, the way children do when they're trying to decide if an adult is telling the truth. Then she nodded slowly, picked up her fork, and went back to her dinner. But she didn't look convinced. Meredith cleared her throat. Ellie, finish your chicken. The rest of the meal passed in near silence. Meredith scrolled through her phone between bites, her thumb moving with the practiced speed of someone who lived half her life on a screen. Nathan ate mechanically, eyes distant, already checked out. I pushed food around my plate and felt the weight of the diagnosis sitting on the kitchen counter like an uninvited guest. After dinner, store-bought pecan pie that Meredith didn't bother slicing properly, I helped clear the table. Nathan stood at the sink loading the dishwasher with the distracted efficiency of a man whose mind was already somewhere else. Probably the garage. Probably his phone. Anywhere but here. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope. $3,000 cash. Same as every month for the past 3 years. I held it out to Nathan. Here. He glanced at it, then took it without meeting my eyes. Didn't count it. Didn't say thank you. Just folded it in half with one hand and slid it into his back pocket like it was a gas station receipt. $3,000. Every month. 36 months. $108,000 total. I'd kept count. I wondered if they had. Meredith watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, leaning against the frame. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw something that made my stomach tighten, a look I'd been seeing more and more lately. Cold. Appraising. The look of someone running numbers in her head, measuring input against output, calculating whether the math still worked in her favor. I wasn't adding up the way I used to. I could see it in her face, as clearly as if she'd said it out loud. Then she turned and walked upstairs without a word. Nathan mumbled something about putting the kids to bed and followed her. Their footsteps faded down the hall. And then a door closed, and I was alone in the kitchen with the hum of the dishwasher and the smell of cold chicken and the diagnosis folder still sitting on the counter where I'd left it. I cleaned the rest of the kitchen, wiped down the counters, put away the leftovers, rinsed Meredith's wine glass that she'd left on the island like she always did. Small things, routine things. The kind of tasks you do when your hands need something to hold on to because your mind is going somewhere you don't want it to go. By 9 o'clock, the house was quiet. James was asleep. I'd heard Nathan's voice reading to him, low and patient, one of the few things Nathan did well without being asked. Ellie's light clicked off at 8:45. Meredith and Nathan had retreated to their bedroom at the end of the hall. Door closed. Voices low. I sat in the armchair in my room, still fully dressed, the diagnosis folder on the nightstand beside a framed photograph of Louise taken the summer before she got sick. She was standing on the porch of our old house in West Ashley, laughing at something I'd said, her hair blowing sideways in the wind. I couldn't remember the joke. I'd give anything to remember it. 15 to 20 years. I should have felt relieved. It could have been worse. Much worse. But all I could think about was the look on Meredith's face when I'd handed Nathan the envelope. That cold, calculating stare. The mental arithmetic. The silent verdict. This complicates things. I sat there in the dark, listening to the house settle around me. The tick of the hall clock. The distant rush of a car on the boulevard. The creak of old floorboards contracting in the cool night air. And then, from somewhere down the hall, voices. Muffled at first. Then, rising. Meredith's voice, sharp as a blade. I stood slowly and moved toward the door. My heart was doing that thing again, the irregular flutter Dr. Whitfield had warned me about just hours ago. Avoid stress. Stay calm. Take your medication. I should have gone back to bed. Close the door. Let whatever was happening down the hall stay down the hall. But Meredith's voice pulled me forward the way a siren pulls a ship toward the rocks. The hallway was dark. The overhead light had clicked off on its timer sometime after 9. The only illumination came from a thin, amber line leaking beneath Meredith and Nathan's bedroom door. I took 3 careful steps. 3 years in this house had taught me where the floorboards creaked and where they didn't. My palm found the cool plaster wall. I leaned in. We need to talk about my father. Meredith's voice. Cold. Clipped. Not the voice she used with clients, or with the kids. This was the voice she saved for when she'd already made up her mind and was simply waiting for Nathan to catch up. Meredith, it's late. I don't care. We're talking about this now. A pause. The rustle of sheets. The bed frame creaked. He's sick, Meredith. Nathan said quietly. You heard him. His heart. I know what he said. Her voice dropped lower, but the cold in it only deepened. And honestly, I don't care about his heart. I care about what this means for us. Silence. He's not going to get better, Nathan. Congestive heart failure. That's not something you bounce back from. That's the beginning of the end. And I am not going to spend the next however many years watching him deteriorate in my house. Around my children. He's your father, Meredith. He's a burden. The word came out flat and final, like a judge delivering a sentence. No hesitation. No tremor. She'd been thinking this for a while. Tonight had just given her permission to say it out loud. And I want him gone. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Colder than the diagnosis. Colder than anything Dr. Whitfield had described. A different kind of heart failure. One they don't teach you about in medical school. Gone? Nathan's voice was uncertain. What do you mean? Gone. I mean out, Nathan. Out of this house. I want that sick old man. Out of my space. Out of my children's lives. And out of my future. He takes up the guest room. The room Ellie's been asking about for months. She wants an art studio. We could give our daughter something she actually needs instead of keeping it as a waiting room for a man who's only going to get worse. He pays rent. $3,000 a month. She laughed. No humor in it. $3,000 a month, Nathan. Our mortgage is $4,200. He doesn't even cover it. And that money is ours. Money we could use for renovations, for the kids' school, for literally anything other than subsidizing his retirement. He lost your mom 4 years ago. He's still grieving. 4 years. Her voice turned to a blade. At some point, grief becomes an excuse. But not him. He just lingers. And now he's sick. And he's going to linger even longer. And I refuse to let him drag us down with him. Long silence. I stood in the dark hallway, hand pressed flat against the wall, absorbing every word the way a bridge absorbs the weight of traffic passing over it. Steady. silent, taking the load. "What do you want me to do?" Nathan finally asked. His voice was small, defeated. "Tell him tomorrow. Tell him we need the space. Tell him it's for his own good, his health. Less stress, whatever you need to say. But I want him out. 1 week. 1 week? Meredith, I can't just. You can. And you will." Her voice dropped to something worse than shouting. It dropped to certainty. "Because if you don't, Nathan, I will. And I won't be nice about it. Or I'll file for conservatorship and let a judge decide where he goes." Conservatorship. The word hung in the dark like a knife. She'd been researching. She'd been planning. This wasn't a reaction to tonight's news. This was a strategy she'd already mapped out. I waited for Nathan to push back. To say no. He's family. He stays. "Okay." Barely a whisper. "What?" "Okay." Louder now but hollow. "Resigned. I'll tell him tomorrow. I'll handle it." "Good." The bed frame creaked. A lamp clicked off. The amber line beneath their door went dark. And just like that, it was decided. I stood there for another long moment, letting the silence settle around me like sediment sinking to the bottom of a river. Then I turned slowly and walked back to my room. Closed the door, without a sound. Sat down in the armchair by the window. Sick old man. Dead weight. Burden. I want him gone. My daughter. My only child. The girl I'd taught to ride a bike in West Ashley. The teenager I'd driven to prom in my work truck because she said limos were tacky. The woman I'd walked down the aisle at St. Philip's Church while Louise cried in the front pew. The one who'd held my hand when her mother took her last breath and whispered, "We'll get through this together, Dad." And she just called me dead weight. The hours crawled. I didn't sleep. Didn't even try. Just sat there replaying every word, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in my chest where grief used to live. Grief was soft, heavy, but shapeless, something you could carry. This was different. This had edges. When the first pale light of dawn softened the edges of the room, I finally stood, walked to the closet, reached up to the top shelf. My fingers found the lockbox. Small, fireproof, brushed steel, secured with a combination only I knew. I set it on the bed and stared at it. The early light caught the steel surface and threw a faint reflection onto the ceiling. Inside that box were things Meredith had never seen. Things she'd never asked about. Bank statements, portfolio summaries, legal documents, the complete financial history of a man she'd just dismissed as dead weight. I didn't open it. Not yet. But I looked at it, and I felt something shift inside me, something that had been dormant for 3 years, buried under grief and patience, and the quiet hope that my daughter would prove me wrong. Meredith wanted me gone. Fine. I'd leave. But not the way she expected. Not as the sick old man she could forget about. I'd leave on my terms. And when I did, she'd finally understand exactly what she'd thrown away. The combination was Louise's birthday. Month, day, year. 03/17/59. I'd never written it down anywhere. Never needed to. Some numbers you carry in your bones. The lock clicked open. I lifted the lid and looked at what was inside. Bank statements from Chase, neatly folded. Portfolio summaries from a private wealth management firm in Charlotte. A stack of legal documents held together with a binder clip. Trust paperwork. Tax returns. And at the very bottom, a single photograph of Louise and me standing in front of our first project. A footbridge over Shem Creek in Mount Pleasant. 1987. We were both sunburned and grinning. She was holding a level like a trophy. I picked up the most recent portfolio statement and ran my finger down the columns. The number at the bottom hadn't changed much since last month. $15,347,000. I stared at it the way you stare at a loaded weapon. with respect, with caution, with the understanding that what you hold in your hands has the power to change everything. Let me tell you how that number got there. Because it didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen by accident. Dawson Engineering started in 1987. Not with an office or a business plan or investors. It started with Louise and me, a borrowed surveying kit, and a contract to build a pedestrian bridge over Shem Creek for the town of Mount Pleasant. The budget was $40,000. We came in at $38,500, and the town council was so impressed, they gave us 2 more projects that same year. Louise kept the books. She was sharper with numbers than I ever was. I could calculate load-bearing capacity and soil composition in my head, but she could tell you down to the penny what every project cost, what it earned, and where the money needed to go next. We made a good team. I built the bridges. She built the business. Through the 90s, we grew. Small bridges became bigger bridges. We picked up highway contracts, drainage systems, seawall restorations along the coast. By 2000, Dawson Engineering had 40 employees and projects across 3 states. By 2010, we had stakes in over 30 infrastructure developments, bridge repairs, road expansions, commercial foundation work from Savannah to Wilmington. We weren't flashy. Never wanted to be. We lived in the same house in West Ashley that we'd bought in 1990. Drove trucks until the odometers rolled over. Put Meredith through College of Charleston without loans. Took 1 vacation a year. Always somewhere Louise could see the ocean. She loved the ocean the way some people love music. Completely. Without needing to explain why. In 2019, a federal engineering conglomerate came knocking. They wanted to acquire Dawson Engineering, the contracts, the equipment, the reputation, all of it. Offered $11 million. Cash. Louise and I talked about it for weeks. She was already sick by then. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed that spring. Stage 3. The doctors were optimistic in the way doctors are optimistic when they don't want to say what they're really thinking. She insisted on working through treatments. Kept the books from her hospital bed, laptop balanced on the tray table beside her IV stand. Take it, she told me one night. We were sitting on the porch in West Ashley. The crickets were loud. She had a blanket across her lap, even though it was July. We built something, Henry. Something real. Let someone else carry it forward. So I took it. $11 million. I paid taxes. Paid off the house. Set aside money for Louise's care. Everything the best oncologists at MUC could offer. The rest, just under $8 million, I invested. Conservative. The way Louise would have done it. Real estate investment trusts that paid steady dividends. Blue chip stocks, municipal bonds, treasury notes. Nothing exotic. Nothing that would keep me up at night. Over the next 6 years, with compound growth and reinvested dividends, $8 million became 15. Louise never got to see it. She died 11 months after the diagnosis, on a Tuesday morning in March, while the azaleas outside her hospital window were just starting to bloom. I was holding her hand. Meredith was in the hallway, on the phone with her office. Finishing a call, she said, "Couldn't wait." I try not to hold that against her. I try. After Louise died, I sold the house in West Ashley. Couldn't stay there. Every room smelled like her. Every corner held a conversation I'd never finish. I put the money from the sale into the portfolio and moved into a furnished apartment in James Island while I figured out what came next. 2 weeks after the funeral, Meredith called. "Come stay with us, Dad. Just until you figure things out. The kids would love having you around." She sounded warm. She sounded like her mother. I said yes. Packed what I needed. Moved into the guest bedroom that used to be Nathan's home office. Started paying $3,000 a month in cash because I didn't want to be a freeloader and because I wanted to contribute something without revealing the full picture. And I made a decision. The most important decision I'd made since selling the company. I wouldn't tell them about the money. Not the real number. Not the 15 million sitting in accounts they'd never thought to ask about. Meredith knew I'd sold Dawson Engineering. She assumed the sale had been modest, enough to retire on. Maybe $1 million or $2 million after taxes and Louise's medical bills. I never corrected her. She never asked. I wanted to see something. Something that mattered more to me than any number on any statement. I wanted to see if my daughter loved me for me, for the father who taught her to ride a bike and walked her down the aisle and held her mother's hand at the end, or if she loved me for what she thought she'd one day inherit. It was a test. The hardest test I'd ever designed. Harder than any load-bearing calculation. Harder than any soil analysis. Harder than any bridge I'd ever built, because this one had no margin for error. Either the structure held, or it collapsed. For 3 years, I watched. I paid my rent. I helped with the kids. I kept quiet. I hoped. Last night, standing in that dark hallway, I got my answer. I closed the lockbox. Locked it. Set it on the bed beside Louise's photograph. The sun was climbing now, pouring through the window, turning the room gold. I could hear Meredith's BMW starting in the driveway below. The engine smooth and confident. The sound of someone who believed she was in control of everything. She had no idea. I'd leave. But not the way she expected. The coffee machine hissed and sputtered, filling the kitchen with the sharp smell of dark roast. I stood at the counter watching the carafe fill, hands steady on the granite. I hadn't slept, but I'd showered, shaved, put on khakis and a clean polo. If Meredith was going to say what I knew she was going to say, I'd meet her looking like a man in full control of his life. Behind me, footsteps on tile. Not Nathan's shuffling morning walk. These were crisp, purposeful, heels clicking. Morning, Dad. Meredith's voice was clipped. Professional. The voice she used when she was about to close a deal or terminate a contract. I'd heard her rehearse calls to clients in this exact tone, standing in this exact kitchen, pacing between the island and the refrigerator while she outlined terms the other party had no choice but to accept. I turned slowly. She stood in the doorway, already dressed for the day. White blouse, dark pants, hair pulled back in a low bun, arms crossed. Nathan was nowhere to be seen. She'd sent him away for this. Probably told him to take the kids to breakfast. Clear the field. Morning, Meredith. Coffee? No thanks. She shifted her weight but didn't sit. I think we should talk. I poured my mug, took a slow sip. Let the silence do its work. All right. She didn't waste time. Dad, I'm going to be direct. With your diagnosis, your heart condition, Nathan and I have been talking, and we think it's time you had your own space. Somewhere you can focus on your health. Less noise, less stress, no kids running around. It would be better for your recovery. She said it like she was reading from a script. Every word measured, every pause calculated. This was Meredith, at her most controlled, packaging cruelty in the language of concern. We were thinking maybe a week to find somewhere and get settled. 1 week. The exact timeline she'd given Nathan last night. I set my mug down carefully. Met her eyes. Held them. I understand completely. She blinked. You do? Of course. You're absolutely right. I should have my own place. I'll start making arrangements today. For a brief moment, something cracked in her composure. Surprise. Maybe suspicion. She'd prepared for resistance, for guilt, for the emotional weight of telling her sick father to leave. She hadn't prepared for agreement. Oh. Well, good. That's very understanding of you, Dad. I appreciate you being honest with me, Meredith. She nodded slowly, studying me the way she studied contracts, looking for the clause she'd missed, the loophole she hadn't anticipated. Okay. Well, if you need help finding a place, Nathan can. I'll handle it, don't worry. All right then. She straightened, smoothed her blouse, pulled her car keys from the counter. I'm glad we could have this conversation like adults. I smiled. It didn't reach my eyes. Me too. She left the kitchen without another word. I heard her heels cross the entryway, the front door open and close, the BMW start in the driveway. The engine purred away down the street, and the house went quiet. I took another sip of coffee, set the mug down, pulled out my phone. 3 calls. That's all it would take. The first was to Gregory Hartwell, my attorney for 12 years. He'd handled the sale of Dawson Engineering, set up the trust, managed every legal document that mattered in my life since Louise got sick. He picked up on the second ring. Henry, what can I do for you? I need to move fast on something, Gregory. How quickly can you draft documents if I need them? Depends. What are we talking about? I'll know in a day or two. But I want you on standby. And I need complete discretion. A pause. The kind of pause a good lawyer takes when he can hear the weight behind a request. Understood. I'll clear my schedule. The second call went to Andrea Walsh, my private banker at Chase. She'd managed my portfolio since the Dawson sale. Quiet, efficient, never asked questions she didn't need answers to. Mr. Dawson, how can I help? I need to move some liquidity this week. Possibly a large cash transaction. How large? I glanced toward the front door, making sure Meredith's car was gone. 600,000 to 700,000. Maybe more. We'll need a few days' notice for anything over 500, but it's doable. Wire or cashier's check? Wire. I'll confirm the details tomorrow. We'll be ready. The third call was to Monica Palmer, a realtor who specialized in Sullivan's Island and the coastal barrier islands outside Charleston. I'd kept her card in my wallet for 2 years, ever since Louise had pointed at a house on Sullivan's Island during one of our Sunday drives and said, "When we're old, Henry, let's live somewhere we can hear the ocean." We never got there. But I still had the card. Monica, it's Henry Dawson. I don't know if you remember me. Henry, of course I do. Louise's husband. How are you? I'm in the market. Sullivan's Island. 3 bedrooms. 2.5 baths minimum. Single story. Quiet lot. Ocean view, if possible. Budget is cash. No upper limit. I want to close in 5 days if the property's right. A beat of silence. That's aggressive, Henry. I'm motivated. I can hear that. A pause. Then the sound of a keyboard clicking. Let me pull what I've got. Can you meet tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock? Perfect. I'll text you the address. And Henry? Yeah? Are you okay? I looked around the empty kitchen. Meredith's coffee mug sitting unwashed on the island. Nathan's gym bag thrown across a chair. The diagnosis folder still on the counter where I'd left it last night, untouched by anyone but me. I will be. By noon I'd started packing. Not frantically. Methodically. 1 box at a time. Books first. Then, the few personal items I'd brought with me 3 years ago. A folded quilt Louise had made. The lockbox. The photograph from the nightstand. I moved quietly. Nathan had come back with the kids around 11. I could hear James downstairs building something with blocks, narrating a story about robots and volcanoes. Ellie's music drifted from her room. Something soft and acoustic. Around 2, there was a soft knock on my door. Grandpa. Ellie stood in the doorway, eyes wide and serious. She looked at the box on the bed, then at me, then back at the box. Her chin trembled. Are you leaving? I set down the book I'd been wrapping in newspaper and knelt to her level. The hardwood was cold against my knees. Hey, sweetheart, come here. She didn't move. Just stood there, with her hands clasped in front of her, fingers twisting together the way they did when she was trying not to cry. Are you leaving because of what Mommy said? My chest tightened. What did Mommy say? I heard her tell Daddy that you needed your own space. But you already have your own space. This is your room. I reached out and took her hands. Small and warm and paint-stained. The hands of a child who spent more time drawing than talking. I am going to a new place, sweetheart. Somewhere nearby. But it's not because of anything you did. You hear me? This has nothing to do with you, or James. Then why? Sometimes grown-ups need to make changes. It's complicated. She studied my face with those old soul eyes that saw through every polite lie adults tried to sell her. Then she whispered, "Will I still see you?" "Always. I promise." She nodded, blinked hard, didn't cry. And then she turned and walked back down the hall to her room, without another word. Quiet as a ghost. I stayed there on my knees for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway, listening to her footsteps fade. That was the hardest part so far. Harder than the diagnosis. Harder than the hallway. Harder than anything Meredith had said. Because Ellie hadn't done anything wrong, and she was already paying for it. Sullivan's Island sits just off the coast of Charleston like a whispered secret. You cross the Ben Sawyer Bridge, a narrow, two-lane drawbridge that swings open for shrimp boats and sailboats, and the world changes. The strip malls and traffic lights disappear. The road narrows. Live oaks close in overhead, their branches draped with Spanish moss, so thick it blocks the sky. The air shifts, salt and seagrass and the faint sweetness of oleander blooming in someone's yard. Louise and I used to drive out here on Sunday afternoons. No agenda, no plans, just the bridge and the road and the ocean at the end of it. She'd roll her window down and close her eyes and breathe. And I'd watch her from the driver's seat and think, this is enough. This is everything. Monica Palmer's silver Volvo was already parked at the end of Station 28 when I arrived the next morning at 10 sharp. She stepped out in linen pants and sunglasses, a leather folder tucked under her arm. "Henry Dawson." "It's been too long." "It has." "Ready to find your next home?" "Ready." We drove deeper onto the island, past cottages painted in faded pastels and newer builds with wraparound porches and palmetto trees leaning in the wind. She handed me a folder with 3 listings, but I'd already found the one I wanted online the night before, sitting in my armchair while the rest of the house slept. "This first one is special," she said, turning onto a quiet lane shaded by oaks so old their roots had buckled the sidewalk. Just listed 4 days ago. Motivated sellers. The house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac on a lot that backed up to a tidal creek. Low country style, single story, raised foundation, a deep wraparound porch that faced east toward the ocean, tabby stucco exterior, tin roof gone green with age, shutters the color of a storm sky. It looked like it had grown there, like the oaks and the marsh grass, like it belonged. Monica unlocked the front door and stepped aside. The entry opened into a great room with vaulted ceilings and heart pine floors that glowed amber in the morning light. Windows everywhere, filling the space with the kind of light you can't manufacture. The kitchen sat to the left, white shaker cabinets, soapstone countertops, an island big enough to seat 4. Through the back windows, the tidal creek wound through the marsh like a silver ribbon, and beyond it, the open Atlantic. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a screened porch off the back, with ceiling fans and a view that stretched to the horizon. The master bedroom had French doors opening onto a private patio where you could sit and listen to the creek and the ocean and nothing else. $690,000, Monica said. Fair for the island, especially with the creek access. I'll take it. She paused. You want to make an offer? No. I want to buy it. Asking price. All cash. No contingencies. No inspection. She studied my face for a long moment. The way people do when they're trying to determine whether you're serious or having a breakdown. Henry, are you sure? Don't you want to see the other listings? I'm sure. She nodded slowly. All right. Let me make some calls. While she stepped onto the porch, I walked through the house again. Stood in the kitchen and imagined morning coffee with the creek outside the window. Stood in the master bedroom and thought about waking up to the sound of the ocean instead of the sound of Meredith's heels on tile. Stood in the great room and looked at the wall where I'd hang Ellie's drawing. Louise would have loved this house. She would have stood on this porch and looked at that creek and said, "Henry, we should have done this years ago." And she would have been right. Monica came back smiling. Sellers accepted. Cash, no contingencies, they're thrilled. "We can close in 5 days if your banker can move." She can. Then, welcome to Sullivan's Island. The next 3 days moved fast. Andrea wired the funds on Wednesday. Gregory reviewed the deed. I signed papers at a title company in Mount Pleasant, while Meredith was at work and the kids were at school. Nobody knew. In the evenings I packed. Quietly. 1 box at a time. Everything I owned fit in maybe 20 boxes. 3 years of living small, living quiet, living like I didn't matter. On the last night, Ellie knocked again. She didn't say anything this time. Just stood in the doorway holding a piece of paper, folded in half. She held it out to me. I unfolded it. A drawing. Colored pencils on white construction paper. A bridge, arching over blue water. A man standing on the bridge, tall, wearing a brown jacket. Me. And above the bridge, in the sky, a woman with long hair and a yellow dress, smiling down. Louise. Underneath, in Ellie's careful handwriting, "Grandma is watching you from heaven. She is smiling because she knows you are brave." I stared at that drawing for a long time. The bridge. The water. Louise in the sky. My granddaughter had drawn the exact thing I'd spent my life building, and she didn't even know it. "Thank you, sweetheart," I managed. My voice was steady, but just barely. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me." She hugged me. Fierce and tight, her arms wrapped around my waist. Her face pressed against my shirt. I held her and breathed in the smell of her shampoo and her paint-stained fingers and her 10-year-old courage, and I memorized it. Every second. When she finally let go, she looked up at me with those serious eyes. "Don't forget us, Grandpa." "Never. Not possible." She nodded once and walked away. Day 7. The movers arrived at 8 in the morning. Meredith's BMW was gone. Nathan's sedan was gone. Neither of them had the courage to be here. I walked through the house one last time. James's room first, building blocks scattered across the floor, a half-finished tower on his desk. Ellie's room, the bed made, her drawings taped to every wall. The dining room where we'd had that last dinner. The kitchen where I'd stood alone washing Meredith's wine glass. I didn't open their bedroom door. Didn't need to. I'd heard everything I needed to hear through those walls. I set an envelope on the kitchen island. $3,000 cash. Same as always. Next to it, a note on a folded piece of paper. "Meredith and Nathan. Thank you for your hospitality over the past 3 years. I found a new place and will be out by noon. Don't worry about the dead weight anymore. The envelope is this month's contribution. Dad." I read it twice. Considered adding something warmer. Decided against it. I pulled the house key off my ring, set it beside the envelope, grabbed my keys, and walked out. The movers were already pulling away. I climbed into my truck, set Ellie's drawing carefully on the passenger seat where the diagnosis folder had sat 6 days ago, and drove toward the Ben Sawyer Bridge. The bridge was up when I got there, swung open for a shrimp boat heading out to sea. I sat in the truck with the windows down, salt air filling the cab, and watched the boat pass through. An old man at the helm, sunburned and steady, heading out alone into open water. The bridge lowered. I drove across. Sullivan's Island appeared through the oaks, quiet and green and waiting. 17 minutes. That's how far my old life was from my new one. 17 minutes. And a bridge. 17 missed calls the first day. 23 the second. By the third day, I stopped counting. I unpacked slowly. There was no rush anymore. No one waiting for me at a dinner table. No one needing the bathroom. No one's schedule to work around. Just me and 20 boxes in a house that smelled like salt air and fresh paint and possibility. The first thing I hung was Ellie's drawing. I found a nail in the kitchen junk drawer and tapped it into the wall above the fireplace in the great room, right where the morning light would catch it. The bridge. The water. Louise in the sky. I stepped back and looked at it from across the room. A 10-year-old's artwork hanging in a house worth $690,000. And it was the most valuable thing in the building. I set up the coffee maker on the kitchen counter. Found my mug, the old blue one Louise had bought at a pottery shop in Beaufort, chipped on the handle but still holding strong. Plugged in the coffee maker, filled the reservoir, scooped grounds into the filter. The small rituals. The ones that keep you anchored when everything else is drifting. That first morning, I took my coffee and my heart medication out to the screened porch and sat in an old rocking chair the previous owners had left behind. The tidal creek was low, exposing mud flats where fiddler crabs scuttled in the early light. Beyond the marsh, the Atlantic stretched out gray-blue and endless. A pelican dove into the shallows came up with something silver in its beak. I sat there for an hour. Didn't read. Didn't check my phone. Just sat and listened to the creek and the birds and the distant rhythm of waves breaking on the beach a quarter-mile away. For the first time in 3 years, the silence wasn't lonely. It was chosen. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter inside. I let it buzz. Back in Mount Pleasant, the world I'd left behind was unraveling. I didn't witness any of it directly, but I could piece it together from the voicemails I didn't listen to, and the texts I didn't answer, and the increasingly desperate tone of the messages that piled up on my screen like unanswered prayers. Meredith found the note first. I know because her initial text, sent at 6:47 that evening, was clinical. Precise. The message of someone who hadn't yet grasped the situation. Dad got your note. Glad you found a place. Let us know the address when you're settled. By 10 o'clock that night, the tone had changed. Nathan's name lit up my screen. Then Meredith's. Then Nathan's again. 3 calls in 8 minutes. I watched the phone vibrate on the soapstone counter, the screen glowing in the dark kitchen, and took another sip of bourbon. By day 3, the texts had shifted from polite to frantic. Meredith had done the math. $3,000 a month. Gone. Mortgage $4,200. Nathan's salary covered the basics. But barely. Her income from the law firm was good, but the house in Mount Pleasant was bleeding them. They'd been relying on my contribution more than they'd ever admitted. Maybe more than they'd even realized. I knew this because Meredith's text started including numbers. Dad, we need to talk about the financial arrangement. Then, 2 days later, Dad, this is urgent. Please call. Then, Dad, where are you? No one knows where you went. We're worried. Worried. That was a generous word for what they were feeling. Worried is what you feel when someone's late for dinner. What they were feeling was the cold realization that the man they'd called dead weight had been the only thing keeping their house afloat. I didn't respond to any of it. Read receipts on. Let them see. I'd read every word. Let that silence do what silence does best. Make people listen to their own thoughts. On the 4th Saturday after I'd moved, I drove into Charleston proper to meet Jerome Williams at the public dock on Shem Creek. We'd been fishing together every Saturday morning for 6 years, ever since Louise had dragged me to his church for Easter service, and he'd invited me to try his secret redfish spot. Jerome was 62, built like a retired linebacker, with a deep voice that could fill a sanctuary or calm a frightened child with equal ease. He'd been the pastor at Gethsemane Community Church for 28 years. He was also the only person on earth who knew the full truth about my finances. We sat on the dock with our lines in the water, the sun barely up, the creek glassy and still. A great blue heron stood motionless in the shallows 20 yards away, patient as a saint. Jerome didn't push. He never did. He cast his line, adjusted his hat, and waited. That was his gift. He knew that men like me don't talk until they're ready, and that the fastest way to make us ready is to stop asking. 15 minutes passed before I spoke. She called me dead weight, Jerome. He didn't flinch. Didn't turn. Just nodded slowly, his eyes on the water. Meredith? Through the bedroom door. The night I got my diagnosis. She told Nathan she wanted me out. Called me a burden. Said I was dragging them down. And Nathan said okay. Jerome exhaled through his nose. A long, slow breath. The breath of a man who has heard worse but still feels the weight of it. What did you do? I left. Bought a house on Sullivan's Island. Cash. $690,000. He turned and looked at me for the first time. His eyebrows rose slightly. Cash. Cash. And she doesn't know about the money. She doesn't know about any of it. Not the 15 million. Not the house. Not the bridge project. He set his rod down and turned fully toward me. Henry, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Go ahead. Are you punishing her? Or are you protecting yourself? The question hung between us like the morning mist over the creek. I stared at the water, watching the current pull a leaf slowly downstream. Both, I said. He nodded. I figured. Just make sure you know when one ends and the other begins. Grief and betrayal are cousins, Henry. They both live in the same house. Be careful which one you feed. I didn't have an answer for that. Not yet. So we sat there and fished and watched the heron finally strike, fast as lightning, pulling a mullet from the shallows and swallowing it whole. My phone buzzed in my pocket on the drive home. Not Meredith. Not Nathan. Gregory Hartwell. I pulled over on Coleman Boulevard and answered, Henry, Gregory. They showed up at my office this morning. Both of them. Meredith found the promissory note referenced in some old paperwork Nathan had in a filing cabinet. She's asking questions. What kind of questions? The kind that tell me she's starting to understand that the man she kicked out wasn't who she thought he was. I stared through the windshield at the live oaks lining the boulevard, their branches meeting overhead like the vault of a cathedral. It's time, Henry. Do you want me to schedule the meeting? I thought about Jerome's question. Punishing or protecting? I thought about Ellie's drawing on my wall. I thought about the bridge I was building on James Island. The one that carried Louise's name. The one my daughter didn't know existed. Schedule it, I said. But Gregory, only the first layer. The portfolio. The promissory note. Nothing else. Not yet. Understood. How much do you want them to know? Enough to understand what they lost. Not enough to understand what's coming. A pause. You're playing a long game. I'm an engineer, Gregory. I build things one layer at a time. Gregory Hartwell's office occupied the 9th floor of a pre-war building on Broad Street, 1 block from the Four Corners of Law, where Charleston's federal courthouse, state courthouse, city hall, and St. Michael's Church all face each other like 4 players in a hand of poker. Gregory liked the location. He liked reminding clients that the law was close. I wasn't in the room when Meredith and Nathan arrived. That was by design. Gregory and I had agreed the first meeting would be his show. I'd get my turn later. But he called me afterward and told me everything. Every word. Every reaction. Every flicker across my daughter's face. They arrived at 10 sharp. Meredith in a blazer and heels, dressed like she was walking into a deposition. Nathan in a button-down that didn't quite fit, his face the color of a man who hadn't slept well in 2 weeks. Gregory's assistant showed them in without small talk. Gregory stood behind his desk. Didn't offer coffee. Didn't shake hands. Didn't ask about the kids. Thank you for coming, he said. His voice flat and precise. Please sit. They sat. Meredith composed herself into the posture of someone who expected to negotiate. Nathan sat slightly behind her, already deferring. Gregory reached for a folder on his desk, navy blue, embossed with his firm's logo. He opened it, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the mahogany. This is a portfolio statement dated 5 days ago. Dawson Family Trust. Account summary. Meredith picked it up. Gregory told me her hands were steady at first. Then they weren't. Nathan leaned over her shoulder. His breathing stopped. $15,347,000. Gregory said aloud. Because he wanted the number to land with its full weight. That is the current net worth of your father's investment portfolio. Silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums. That can't be right. Meredith whispered. Gregory pulled out another document. Property deed. Sullivan's Island. $690,000. Paid in full. Cash. Closing date. 8 days after Henry Dawson moved out. Then bank statements. 3 accounts. Chase Private Client. $4.2 million. Wellington Capital Management. $6.8 million. Carolina Federal Credit Union. $2.1 million. Nathan made a sound that wasn't a word. Just air leaving him. Your father sold Dawson Engineering 6 years ago, Gregory continued. The sale netted approximately $8 million after taxes. He invested conservatively. Over 6 years, that portfolio grew to just over $15 million. Meredith was flipping pages, scanning columns, her legal training kicking in through the shock. Looking for errors. Finding none. He never needed your financial support, Gregory said. Not once. Not ever. Nathan spoke first, voice thin and cracked. Then why did he pay us $3,000 a month? Gregory looked at him the way a judge looks at a defendant who's asked the wrong question. He didn't pay you. He gave you money. Every month for 3 years. $108,000 total. And he watched what you did with it. Meredith looked up. What do you mean? Watched. I mean, it was a test. Gregory's voice dropped half a register. Your father wanted to see how you would treat him when you believed he was vulnerable. When you believed he was dependent on you. When you believed $3,000 a month was all he had. He paused. Let the silence do its work. He wanted to see if you loved him. Or if you loved what you thought you'd inherit. He wanted to see if you'd care for him when he was sick. Or if you'd call him dead weight and throw him out the moment he became inconvenient. Meredith flinched. Gregory told me later the blood drained from her face when she realized her father had heard every word she'd said through that bedroom door. Gregory reached for the second document. The promissory note. 3 years ago, your father provided $200,000 to assist with your home purchase. $80,000 for the down payment. $120,000 for renovations. You signed a promissory note agreeing to repay the full amount over 5 years at 4% interest. Nathan picked it up. Hands shaking. Total currently due, including accrued interest. $187,600. The note includes an acceleration clause. If the borrower engages in conduct detrimental to the lender, the full balance becomes due immediately. We thought it was a gift, Meredith said, barely audible. You signed it. Notarized and filed with Charleston County. Ignorance of what you signed is not a defense. Nathan set the note down and stared at the desk. Meredith sat motionless. $15 million worth of numbers blurring behind tears she was fighting not to shed. Gregory closed the folder. Straightened his tie. Looked at them with an expression that held no sympathy and no malice. What I've shown you today is the generous part. Meredith's head snapped up. There will be a second meeting. Soon, additional matters will be presented. Matters beyond the financial. He leaned forward, hands flat on the desk. I suggest you use the time between now and then to consider whether there is anything you should disclose voluntarily. Because if there is, I assure you, we already know about it. He stood and opened the door. My assistant will validate your parking. They left without a word. Gregory told me Meredith didn't speak in the elevator, in the lobby, or in the parking garage. Nathan started the car and sat there for 15 minutes, hands on the wheel, engine running, going nowhere. Gregory called me that afternoon. I was on the porch, watching the tide come in. It went exactly as we planned, he said. How did she look? Like someone who just realized the ground she's been standing on was never solid. I watched a pelican dive into the creek. Good. Henry, the second meeting. How far do you want to take this? I thought about Jerome's question. Punishing or protecting? I thought about the 2 folders David Chen was building in his office on King Street. Red for money stolen. Black for freedom they tried to take. All the way, Gregory. All the way to the bottom. David Chen's office sat above a used bookshop on King Street, wedged between an antique dealer and a coffee roaster. The kind of place you'd walk past 100 times without noticing the narrow door and the steep staircase leading up to the second floor. No sign on the building, no name on the mailbox. Just a suite number and a buzzer that David answered himself. I'd found him through Gregory. Former FBI. 22 years specializing in forensic accounting and white-collar financial crime before going private. 50 years old, graying at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of man who noticed everything and commented on almost nothing. He reminded me of the structural engineers I used to work with, the ones who could look at a bridge and tell you exactly which bolt was under stress. We met 4 days after the first meeting at Gregory's office. I climbed the stairs, knocked, and he opened the door to a small, clean space. 1 desk, 1 laptop, a yellow legal pad covered in handwriting so precise it looked typed. No family photos. No diplomas on the wall. Just a framed quote I couldn't read from across the room, and a window overlooking King Street where tourists wandered past with shopping bags and iced coffees, completely unaware that the man upstairs made his living dismantling people's secrets. Mr. Dawson. He shook my hand once. Firm. Brief. Have a seat. I sat across from him. He folded his hands on the desk. Gregory says you need a deep dive. Financial records, communications, legal filings. How deep are we talking? All the way to the bottom. He nodded. No reaction. No raised eyebrows. Just a professional assessing the scope of a job. That'll take time. 10 days, maybe less if they've been sloppy. They've been sloppy. He allowed himself the smallest smile. Then I'll have something for you by the end of the month. He slid a contract across the desk. I'll need authorization to access certain records. Bank statements, credit reports, phone records, public filings. Gregory can get subpoena power if necessary, but it moves faster if you sign off on everything up front. I signed without reading. Pushed it back. Find everything, David. I always do. 10 days later, he called. Come in. The red folder's ready. I was there in 20 minutes. When I walked in, a single folder sat on his desk. Red. Thick. He gestured to the chair. I sat. Let's start with the money, he said, and opened it. The first document was a stack of bank statements. Wells Fargo. Savings account opened 24 months ago. He slid them across to me, key figures highlighted in yellow. Sole account holder, Meredith Dawson Cole. Nathan Cole is not listed as a joint owner, authorized user, or beneficiary. As far as I can determine, he has no knowledge this account exists. I leaned forward. 36 deposits over the past 3 years, David continued. Every single one for exactly $2,500. Always within 2 to 3 days of the first of the month. I looked at the dates, the amounts. Perfectly timed. Perfectly consistent. Like clockwork. You were giving them $3,000 a month, David said. She was routing $500 into their joint checking account for household expenses. Mortgage, utilities, groceries. The other $2,500 went straight into this account. Every month. For 3 years. I did the math. Even though I already knew. $90,000. 90,000. 300 to be exact. She was skimming 70% of everything I gave them. 83% technically. 500 out of 3,000 into the household. The rest into her private account. I stared at the rows. 36 lines of 2,500. 3 years of my money. Money I'd given in good faith. Money I'd believed was helping them stay afloat. And she'd been siphoning it into an account her own husband didn't know existed. What's she spending it on? David pulled out another set of documents. Thicker. He separated them into 2 stacks. Stack 1. He tapped the left pile. Shell Company, Palmetto Holdings LLC. Registered with the South Carolina Secretary of State 18 months ago. Sole member, Meredith Dawson Cole. Registered agent, herself. Operating address, a P.O. box. In Mount Pleasant, she created a shell company, using her real estate law expertise. Clean paperwork. Proper filings. She knew exactly what she was doing. He slid across the corporate documents, the articles of organization, the operating agreement, all signed by Meredith. All hidden from Nathan. Through Palmetto Holdings, she purchased 2 parcels of land on James Island. Separate transactions, 7 months apart. Total acquisition cost, $72,000. He pulled out a map, printed from the Charleston County GIS system. 2 lots, highlighted in yellow on the western edge of James Island. Near the marsh, near the water, near a stretch of undeveloped land. Because I owned the lot next to them, I stared at the map. My throat tightened. The 2 parcels Meredith had purchased were less than 200 yards from the construction site for the Louise Dawson Memorial Bridge. David watched my face. He didn't know why I'd gone still. Didn't know about the bridge. Didn't know about Louise. He just saw a man looking at a map and turning to stone. Henry? You all right? I set the map down carefully. Pressed my palms flat on the desk. Took a slow breath. David, I need you to check something else. Namit. The Louise Dawson Memorial Bridge Project. James Island. It's a pedestrian bridge being built with private funding. The donor is anonymous. I paused. I'm the donor. $2.3 million. The project has been in development for 14 months. David's expression didn't change, but his pen stopped moving. That was his version of shock. I need you to find out if anyone has been making inquiries about that project. Land purchases near the site. Zoning requests. Development applications. Anyone trying to position themselves to profit from the increased property values the bridge will create. He looked at the map. Then at the 2 yellow parcels. Then back at me. You think your daughter bought land next to a bridge she didn't know you were building? I think my daughter is a real estate lawyer who found a public infrastructure project in the county records, identified the surrounding parcels as undervalued, and bought them through a shell company funded with money she stole from me. I think she did all of this without knowing the anonymous donor was her own father, building a bridge to honor her own mother. David was quiet for a long moment. What am I going to find? He asked. I looked at him. The anger I felt wasn't the hot kind. It was geological. The kind that builds over millions of years. The kind that moves continents. I hope I'm wrong, David. But I don't think I am. David Chen called on a Tuesday morning. Not a text. Not an email. A call the kind where the voice on the other end pauses before speaking, as if choosing each word, like a surgeon, choosing a blade. Henry, he said. I need you to come in. I drove to King Street with the windows down, the salt air thick and warm against my forearm. The bookshop below David's office had a display of Southern cookbooks in the window. A woman was reading on the bench outside, her sandals kicked off, her toes curling against the brick. The world looked ordinary. I knew it wouldn't stay that way. David was standing when I walked in. Not sitting behind his desk. Standing beside it, hands flat on the surface, as if bracing against something. The red folder from our last meeting was still on the shelf behind him, but in the center of the table sat a new one, black, thick, and closed. Sit down, he said. I sat. I followed your instinct about the 2 parcels on James Island, David began. The ones purchased through Palmetto Holdings. $72,000. 2 lots, both within 200 yards of the Louise Dawson Memorial Bridge. He opened the black folder and turned it toward me. The first page was a zoning application, filed 4 months ago by Palmetto Holdings LLC sole member Meredith Dawson Cole, requesting rezoning of both parcels from residential to mixed-use commercial. The application cited projected foot traffic from the bridge as justification for a small retail and cafe development. She's trying to build on it, I said. She's trying to profit from it, David corrected. The bridge you funded. The bridge named after your wife. I stared at the page. The font was small, bureaucratic, the kind of language that hides intention behind procedure. But the intention was clear. Meredith had taken the $72,000 she siphoned from my monthly support, created a shell company, purchased land adjacent to the bridge I had anonymously funded with $2.3 million in Louise's memory, and filed to develop it commercially, using the foot traffic my own project would generate as her business case. She was building her future on her mother's name. David turned to the next section. It gets worse. A printout from the South Carolina Department of Social Services. A preliminary inquiry form, not a full investigation, but a request for one filed anonymously 6 weeks ago. The subject: Henry James Dawson, age 65. The allegation: cognitive decline, self-neglect, and potential financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The filer had checked the box for family member with concerns. She filed this? I asked. The form is anonymous, but I cross-referenced the submission date, the IP metadata from the online portal, and the language used in the narrative section. David pointed to a highlighted paragraph. The phrasing matches a legal memo I found in Meredith's cloud backup, a memo she drafted on her own firm's letterhead 3 months ago, titled Conservatorship Strategy H. Dawson. I read the memo. It was written in clean, professional legal language, the kind Meredith had spent 7 years at the bar learning to deploy. The memo outlined a 3-phase plan. Phase 1. File a DSS inquiry to create an official paper trail suggesting cognitive decline. Phase 2. Petition the Charleston County Probate Court for emergency conservatorship over my finances and healthcare decisions. Phase 3. Once appointed conservator, redirect all assets, including the trust, into accounts she controlled. The memo estimated the total value of the estate at $15.4 million. She knew. Not the exact figure, perhaps, but she had done her research. She had searched public records, estimated the Dawson Engineering sale price, calculated probable investment returns. Her estimate was off by only $53,000. There's one more thing, David said. He reached into the folder and pulled out a USB drive sealed in a small evidence bag. This didn't come from my investigation. It came from Nathan. I looked up. Nathan Cole contacted me 2 days ago through a mutual acquaintance, a paralegal at Gregory's firm. He said he'd been recording conversations inside the house for 6 months. Not all of them, but the important ones. David set the USB on the table between us. He gave me this voluntarily. No subpoena. No deal. He said, and I'm quoting, "I can't be part of this anymore." What's on it? I've listened to 14 of the recordings so far. They include Meredith discussing the conservatorship plan in detail. Meredith instructing Nathan to act as a witness to your supposed confusion. Meredith rehearsing what she would say to a judge. And one recording dated the night you left where she says, and again I'm quoting, "Once I have conservatorship, he doesn't get to decide anything. Not his money, not his doctors, not where he lives." The room was quiet. King Street traffic hummed below. The ceiling fan turned slowly, its chain swaying like a metronome, counting seconds I couldn't get back. How many recordings total? I asked. 43. I nodded. Not because I understood, not because I accepted it, but because the body has a way of moving when the mind refuses to. You nod. You breathe. You press your palms flat against your knees and you hold still, Because if you don't, something inside you might crack along a line you didn't know existed. My daughter, the girl I taught to ride a bicycle on East Bay Street. The woman I walked down the aisle at St. Philip's Church. The person I trusted with my home, my grandchildren. My final years had built a legal machine designed to erase me. Not metaphorically. Literally. She wanted to take my name off my own life. "What do you want to do?" David asked. I looked at the black folder, then at the red folder on the shelf, then at the USB drive between us, small and silver, and heavier than anything I had ever held. "Schedule the second meeting with Gregory," I said. All of it. The red folder, the black folder, the recordings, everything on the table. David nodded. "And David, make sure Nathan is in the room." I stood, thanked him, and walked down the narrow staircase to King Street. The woman on the bench was gone. The cookbooks were still in the window. The air smelled like jasmine and fried shrimp from the restaurant on the corner. I sat in my truck for 11 minutes before I turned the key. "Louise," I thought. "She's using your bridge to get rich. She's using my heart to take everything. And then... But she doesn't know what's coming." Gregory Hartwell's conference room had been rearranged. The long mahogany table that usually sat 6 now held only 4 chairs, 2 on each side, facing each other like opposing counsel in a trial that had no judge. The blinds were half drawn. Morning light from Broad Street cut across the table in clean diagonal lines, illuminating the grain of the wood and the 2 folders placed side by side at Gregory's end. One red, one black. I arrived at 8:45. Gregory was already there, standing at the window with his coffee. His tie loosened a 1/4 inch, the only sign I had ever seen that the man felt tension. He turned when I entered. "They confirmed. 9 o'clock, he said. "Nathan? He'll be here." Separately. I told him to arrive at 9:15. "Meredith doesn't know." I sat in the chair closest to the wall. From this angle I could see the door, the folders, and Gregory's face. 3 things I needed to watch simultaneously. The USB drive sat in a small clear case beside the black folder, catching light like a piece of evidence in a courtroom, which, if this went wrong, it might become. At 9:02 the receptionist buzzed. Gregory pressed the intercom. "Send them in." The door opened. Meredith walked in first, wearing a charcoal blazer and black heels that clicked against the hardwood. With a rhythm I recognized, deliberate, controlled, the walk of a woman who had rehearsed her composure in the car. Behind her came Nathan, but not Nathan. A version of Nathan I hadn't seen before, thinner, unshaven, wearing a sport coat that hung loose at the shoulders. He looked like a man who had stopped eating regular meals. Meredith stopped when she saw me. I hadn't been in the room during the first meeting. Gregory had handled it alone, the portfolio reveal, the promissory note, the $15.3 million disclosure. Meredith had left that meeting white-faced and silent, according to Gregory. She had expected negotiation. She had received arithmetic. Now I was sitting 6 feet from her, and she hadn't prepared for that. "Dad," she said. The word came out thin, almost a question. "Sit down, Meredith." She sat. Nathan took the chair beside her, but shifted it 3 inches to the left, a small distance. But I noticed. Gregory noticed. Meredith did not. Gregory closed the door and took his seat at the head of the table. He placed both hands flat on the surface, a gesture I had seen him use in depositions. It meant, "Listen carefully, because I will only say this once." "Thank you both for coming," Gregory said. "This meeting will cover 2 categories of information. The first is financial. The second is legal. I will present them in order. I advise you to listen fully before responding." Meredith crossed her arms. "I have a right to know what this is about before." "You have a right to leave," Gregory interrupted, his voice even and low. "At any point. But if you leave before I finish, the next conversation will be between my office and the Charleston County solicitor. That is not a threat. It is a scheduling matter." The room went still. Meredith's jaw tightened. She uncrossed her arms and placed her hands on the table, mirroring Gregory's posture without realizing it. "Proceed," she said. Gregory opened the red folder. "Over the past 36 months, Henry Dawson provided your household with $3,000 per month in cash support. Total, $108,000. He turned the first page toward her, a spreadsheet with dates, amounts, and notations. "Of that amount, our forensic investigation has confirmed that you deposited $2,500 per month, 83%, into a personal Wells Fargo savings account held solely in your name. Account ending 4,471. Total diverted, $90,300. Meredith's eyes moved to the spreadsheet, but her face didn't change. She had trained herself for this. 7 years of courtroom work had taught her how to receive bad news without flinching. But her hands pressed harder against the table, the tendons visible beneath the skin. "The remaining $500 per month was deposited into the joint checking account you share with Nathan," Gregory continued. "This means that of the $108,000 your father gave in good faith for household support, Nathan and the children received approximately 6% after shared expenses." Nathan shifted in his chair. He didn't look at Meredith. Gregory turned to the second section. "The $90,300 was not the only diversion. You created a limited liability company, Palmetto Holdings, LLC, registered with the South Carolina Secretary of State, sole member Meredith Dawson Cole. Through this entity, you purchased 2 parcels on James Island for a combined $72,000. He placed a property map on the table. 2 lots highlighted in yellow, sitting like teeth in the jaw of a narrow residential street. And there, marked in blue, less than 200 yards to the north, was the pedestrian bridge. "These parcels are located adjacent to the Louise Dawson Memorial Bridge," Gregory said. "A bridge funded anonymously by your father in the amount of $2.3 million in memory of your mother." Meredith's composure cracked. Not dramatically, not a gasp, not a cry. A fracture. Her left hand curled into a fist on the table. Her eyes moved from the map to me. And for the first time since she'd walked in, she looked not angry, not defensive, but afraid. "You knew about the bridge," she said to me. It wasn't a question. "I built the bridge," I said. Silence. Gregory let it hold for 5 seconds, long enough to feel permanent, before continuing. "You filed a rezoning application through Palmetto Holdings 4 months ago, requesting commercial mixed-use designation for both parcels. The application cites projected pedestrian traffic from the bridge as the primary economic justification." Gregory closed the red folder. "In summary, you took your father's money, created a shell company, purchased land beside a memorial your father funded for your deceased mother, and planned to develop it for personal profit." Meredith said nothing. Her fist was still closed. Nathan stared at the property map, as if it were a photograph of something dead. Gregory reached for the black folder. "Now," he said, "we move to the second category." He opened it. The first page bore the seal of the South Carolina Department of Social Services. "This," Gregory said, "is worse." The document sat between us like a wound. South Carolina Department of Social Services. The letterhead was clean. Official. The kind of paper that could end a life without ever drawing blood. Gregory lifted the first page and read aloud. "An anonymous inquiry was submitted 6 weeks ago to the DSS Adult Protective Services Division. Subject: Henry James Dawson. Age: 65. Allegations: cognitive decline, self-neglect, and suspected financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult by an unknown third party." He paused. The filer checked the box for family member with concerns. Meredith's breathing changed. Not faster, shallower. The kind of breathing that happens when the body decides to use less oxygen, as if shrinking might make you invisible. "The form was submitted through the DSS online portal," Gregory continued. "Our investigator obtained metadata associated with the submission. The IP address traces to a device registered at 214 Oyster Point Drive, Mount Pleasant." He looked at Meredith. Your home address. That doesn't prove. I'm not finished. Gregory's voice didn't rise. It lowered a technique I had watched him use in 30 years of friendship. The quieter Gregory got, the more dangerous the information. He turned to the next page. A printed document on law firm letterhead. Meredith's own firm. Dawson Cole and Associates. The memo was titled, Conservatorship Strategy, H. Dawson, dated 3 months before the DSS filing. This memo, Gregory said, was recovered from a cloud backup associated with your professional email account. It outlines a 3-phase strategy. Phase 1. File an anonymous DSS inquiry to establish an official record of alleged cognitive decline. Phase 2. Petition Charleston County Probate Court for emergency conservatorship over Henry Dawson's financial and healthcare decisions. Phase 3. Upon appointment as conservator, redirect all assets, including the Dawson Family Trust, into accounts under your direct control. Gregory placed the memo flat on the table, so every word was visible. The estimated estate value listed in your memo is $15.4 million. The actual value of the Dawson Family Trust, as disclosed in our first meeting, is $15.347 million. Your estimate was off by $53,000. Nathan was staring at the table. Not at the memo, not at Meredith, not at me. At the wood itself, as if he were counting the grain, looking for a place to disappear into. You researched public records, Gregory said. You estimated the sale price of Dawson Engineering. You calculated probable investment returns over 6 years. And you built a legal strategy to take control of your father's entire estate while he was alive, while he was competent, and while he was living under your roof, paying you $3,000 a month. Meredith opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She closed it. Her jaw worked sideways, once a motion I remembered from her childhood. The thing she did before crying. But she didn't cry. She held. Gregory reached for the USB drive. This brings us to the final item. He held the small silver drive between his thumb and forefinger, turning it so the overhead light caught its surface. This was provided voluntarily, no subpoena, no legal compulsion by Nathan Cole. Meredith turned to Nathan. The movement was slow, mechanical, the way a camera pans in a film when the director wants you to feel the weight of what's about to happen. Nathan, she said. His name sounded different in her mouth now. Not a word. A warning. Nathan didn't look at her. He looked at me. His eyes were red at the edges, the skin beneath them bruised with sleeplessness. He swallowed once and spoke. 6 months, he said. I recorded conversations for 6 months. 43 recordings. I couldn't. His voice broke. He pressed his knuckles against his lips, steadied himself, and started again. I couldn't keep pretending. I watched you plan this, Meredith. I watched you sit at the kitchen table after the kids were asleep and write legal strategies to take your father's life away from him. I watched you rehearse what you'd say to a judge. I heard you call him. He stopped, looked at me, then back at the table. I heard you call him things no daughter should ever say about her father. The room held its breath. Even the traffic on Broad Street seemed to pause, as if Charleston itself had leaned in to listen. Gregory set the USB drive on the table. The recordings include the following. Meredith discussing the conservatorship plan in detail on at least 7 occasions. Meredith instructing Nathan to act as a corroborating witness to alleged episodes of confusion. Meredith rehearsing testimony for a probate hearing, and one recording, dated the evening of Henry's departure, in which Meredith states, and I will quote directly, "Once I have conservatorship, he doesn't get to decide anything. Not his money. Not his doctors. Not where he lives. Not when he dies. Not when he dies." I had heard David Chen read that line in his office a week ago. It had broken something in me then. A small bone, in a place I couldn't name. Hearing it again, in this room, with my daughter 6 feet away, didn't break anything new. It confirmed the fracture. Some things, once broken, simply stay broken. You learn to walk with the limp. Meredith's fist uncurled on the table. Her fingers spread flat, trembling, the nails pressing white crescents into the mahogany. She stared at Nathan with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not betrayal, but the disorientation of someone who has just discovered that the walls of their house were never made of stone. They were made of paper, and everyone could see through them. "You recorded me," she whispered. "You gave me no choice," Nathan said. I stood. The chair scraped against the floor, a sharp, clean sound that cut through the silence like a match striking. Both of them looked at me. Gregory looked at me. The room waited. "Meredith," I said. She met my eyes. For 1 second, maybe less, I saw the girl on the bicycle. East Bay Street, age 7, streamers on the handlebars, laughing because the wind had stolen her ribbon. That girl was still in there, buried under strategy memos and shell companies and recordings that would hold up in any court in South Carolina. "I didn't come here to destroy you," I said. "I came here to show you what you've become." I sat back down. Gregory straightened his tie. "We will now discuss terms." Gregory removed a single document from beneath the black folder, a white legal envelope, unsealed, with my name typed in the upper left corner and Meredith's full legal name centered below. He slid it to the middle of the table and opened it slowly, as if unfolding a map to a place no one wanted to visit. "What follows," Gregory said, "is a proposed resolution. It is not a plea deal. It is not a settlement. It is an offer made once, made now, and made entirely at the discretion of Henry Dawson. If declined, every item in the red and black folders, along with the 43 audio recordings, will be forwarded to the Charleston County Solicitor's Office, the South Carolina Bar Association, and the Department of Social Services within 72 hours. Meredith sat motionless. Her hands were still flat on the table, fingers spread, as if she were holding herself to the earth. "I'll start with the criminal exposure," Gregory said. He listed them the way a doctor reads lab results, factual, clinical, without mercy or malice. Embezzlement of funds from a family member, $90,300. South Carolina. Code section 1613230. Classified as a felony for amounts exceeding $2,000. Penalty: up to 10 years. He turned the page. Filing a false report with the Department of Social Services, Section 637440. Misdemeanor: up to 90 days. But when combined with intent to obtain conservatorship for financial gain, the solicitor could pursue it as part of a fraud conspiracy. That elevates the exposure. Next page. Forgery and fraud in the creation of Palmetto Holdings LLC, using diverted funds to purchase real property while concealing the source. Wire fraud if any electronic transfers cross state lines. The federal threshold is low, Meredith. You know that. He paused. Let the arithmetic settle. And finally, attempted conservatorship fraud. Filing or conspiring to file a conservatorship petition based on fabricated evidence of cognitive decline, with the intent to seize control of an estate valued at over $15 million. This is not a misdemeanor. In the Fourth Circuit, with these facts, a prosecutor could seek 5 to 12 years. The numbers hung in the air like smoke. 10 years, 90 days, 12 years. I watched Meredith add them silently, the way she used to add columns of figures at the kitchen table when she was studying for the bar. Her mind was still working. It never stopped working. That was both her greatest talent and the thing that had brought her to this chair. "Now," Gregory said, "the terms." He laid out 5 points, each one typed, numbered, single-spaced. 1. Financial restitution. You will repay the full amount of diverted funds, $90,300, plus the promissory note balance of $187,600, plus accrued interest and legal fees, totaling $17,100. Grand total, $295,000. Payment in full, within 60 days. Meredith's lips parted. I knew what she was calculating. The house in Mount Pleasant was worth roughly $400,000 with the mortgage. Her savings, the real savings, not the stolen ones, were thin. Nathan's income as a project manager covered the monthly expenses, but left little margin. $295,000 in 60 days meant selling something. Probably the house. 2. Palmetto Holdings LLC will be dissolved. Both James Island parcels will be transferred to the Louise Dawson Memorial Bridge Trust, a nonprofit entity administered by Gregory Hartwell's office. No compensation. 3. You will notify the South Carolina Bar Association of the conservatorship memo and the DSS filing within 14 days. You will provide a full written disclosure. The bar will conduct its own review. Henry will not file a separate complaint, but he will not intervene on your behalf. I saw her flinch at that one. Not the money was numbers, and numbers could be moved. But the bar was her identity. Dawson Cole and Associates was her name on a door, her 7 years of study, her reputation in every courtroom in Charleston County. Losing it meant losing the version of herself she had built since law school. 4. Therapy. You will attend weekly sessions with a licensed family therapist for a minimum of 12 months. Nathan and the children may participate at the therapist's discretion. Henry may attend joint sessions if and when he chooses. Progress will be documented and shared with Gregory's office quarterly. 5. The will. Gregory paused here, not for drama, but because he knew this was the one that would cut deepest. Henry Dawson's last will and testament has been revised. The new terms are as follows. He read them. To Meredith Dawson Cole, $100,000. Conditional upon full compliance with all 5 terms of this agreement. Any violation, financial, legal, or therapeutic voids the bequest entirely. To the grandchildren, Ellie Louise Dawson Cole and James Henry Dawson Cole. A dedicated education and welfare trust valued at $2.5 million, administered by an independent trustee appointed by Gregory Hartwell. Meredith will have no access to, control over, or signatory authority on this trust. The remaining balance of the estate, approximately $12.8 million, will be distributed among 3 entities: the Louise Dawson Memorial Bridge Trust, the Charleston Area Community Foundation, and a scholarship fund for first-generation engineering students at the Citadel. Meredith stared at the numbers. 100,000 out of 15.3 million. Less than 1%. The rest, everything her father had built, everything her mother had supported, everything that Dawson Engineering had generated across 3 decades, would go to strangers, to bridges, to students she would never meet. These terms are non-negotiable, Gregory said. You have 72 hours to accept or decline. If you decline, the files go to the solicitor Monday morning. The room was finished. Gregory gathered the folders. Nathan sat with his head bowed, his hands clasped between his knees, like a man in a church pew who has just heard a sermon meant specifically for him. Meredith looked at me. "Dad," she said. Her voice was smaller than I had heard it in 20 years. "Is this really what you want?" I thought about the bridge. I thought about Louise, the way she used to stand at the kitchen window and watch Meredith's car pull into the driveway after work, smiling before the door even opened. I thought about Ellie's drawing. The bridge. The man standing on it. The woman in the yellow dress watching from the sky. What I wanted, I said, was for you to love me when I was sick. This is what's left. Gregory opened the door. Morning light from the hallway poured in, sharp and white. 72 hours, he repeated. Meredith stood. Nathan stood. They walked out separately. She first. He 3 steps behind. The distance between them wider than the hallway allowed. I stayed in the chair. Gregory closed the door and sat across from me. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said. "But I'm right." He nodded. "Yes, you are." Meredith accepted the terms in 41 hours. Not 72. 41. Gregory called me on a Thursday evening while I was watering the jasmine along the back fence on Sullivan's Island. The sun was low, the creek behind the house catching orange light in slow, flat sheets. She signed, Gregory said. All 5 points. No modifications. No counteroffers. Nathan, co-signed as a witness. But Henry, there's something you should know. Nathan filed for legal separation this morning. He retained his own counsel, a woman named Patricia Vega, family law, downtown. I turned off the hose. Water pooled around my boots and seeped into the grass. The kids? Joint custody petition. Temporary arrangement: Nathan keeps the house Monday through Friday while the children are in school. Meredith gets weekends. But that's provisional. If the bar investigation produces a suspension, Nathan's attorney will petition for primary custody. I sat on the porch step. The jasmine smelled sweet and heavy, the way Louise's garden used to smell in July. I thought about Ellie waking up in that house without both parents in the hallway. I thought about James asking where his mother went and getting an answer that was technically true but emotionally empty. Keep me updated, I said. I will. The 60-day clock started the next morning. Within the first week, Meredith listed the Mount Pleasant house. I didn't learn this from Gregory. I learned it from Monica Palmer, who still handled real estate across the Lowcountry and had seen the listing appear on the MLS at $410,000, $30,000 below market, a desperation price. The kind of number that says I need this gone before I drown. The house sold in 9 days. After the mortgage payoff, closing costs, and agent commission, Meredith netted approximately $118,000. Not enough. Not even close. She sold the BMW next. A 2022 X5, black. The one she had driven to Gregory's office with her heels clicking and her composure intact. It went for $34,000 to a dealership on Savannah Highway. Then the jewelry, Louise's diamond earrings, the anniversary bracelet, a Cartier watch Nathan had given her on their 5th wedding anniversary. I don't know the total. Gregory estimated $15,000 to $20,000 based on resale value. By the end of week 3, Meredith had assembled roughly $170,000. She was $125,000 short. Gregory informed me that Meredith had contacted 3 banks for personal loans. All 3 declined. Her credit score had dropped after the mortgage payoff shifted her debt-to-income ratio. The bar investigation, which had begun quietly, a letter arriving at her office on day 12, created an additional risk flag that no lending officer would ignore. On day 28, Meredith borrowed $40,000 from her Aunt Patricia in Somerville. Patricia was Louise's younger sister, a retired school teacher who lived in a small brick ranch house with 2 cats and a vegetable garden. She had $62,000 in savings. She gave Meredith $40,000 of it without asking for paperwork. Because that's what Patricia did. She loved without conditions. She had learned it from Louise. I found out 3 days later. I drove to Somerville that afternoon. Patricia was on her porch, shelling butter beans into a metal bowl. She looked up when I pulled into the driveway and smiled the same smile Louise had, the one that started in the eyes before it reached the mouth. "Henry Dawson," she said. "Sit down before you fall down." I sat. She handed me a bowl. We shelled beans together for 10 minutes before either of us spoke. "She called you," I said. "She did. And you gave her the money." "I did. $40,000, Patricia. That's most of what you have." Patricia set a bean pod on the pile and looked at me. "Henry, I know what she did. She told me everything. Sat right in that chair where you're sitting and cried for 2 hours straight. Not the pretty kind of crying. The ugly kind. The kind where you can't breathe and your face doesn't look like your face anymore." She picked up another pod. "I gave her the money because Louise would have, and because that girl is drowning. And drowning people don't need someone to explain water to them. They need a hand." I didn't argue. Patricia had a way of closing a conversation by saying something so true that any response would sound smaller. "She's moving next week," Patricia continued. A studio apartment in North Charleston, off Rivers Avenue. 500 square feet, maybe. The kids will stay with Nathan at the house during the week. North Charleston. Rivers Avenue. I knew that corridor: auto repair shops, check cashing stores, a laundromat with bars on the windows. It was 34 minutes from Sullivan's Island and a different universe entirely. She's still short, I said. I know. She's looking for work. The firm is effectively closed. The bar sent a letter recommending voluntary suspension pending the investigation. She can't practice. She's applying for paralegal positions and legal assistant work. Entry level. A woman who had argued before the South Carolina Court of Appeals, entry level. A woman who had built her own firm from a single desk in a shared office answering phones. The fall wasn't gradual. It was vertical. On day 45, Gregory called. Meredith had paid $235,000. She had $60,000 remaining. She asked for a 2-week extension. Gregory looked to me. Granted, I said. On day 58, 2 days before the extended deadline, the final wire cleared. $295,000. Every cent. Gregory confirmed receipt and sent Meredith a signed acknowledgement letter. It was done. That Sunday, Patricia called me. Not about money. About a dinner. She wants to apologize, Patricia said. Not on the phone. Not in a letter. In person. She asked if she could come to my house and say it to your face, with the family present. Whose family? Me, Nathan, the children, and you if you'll come. I stood at the kitchen window. The creek was high, the tide pushing salt water into the marsh grass, bending it sideways. A single egret stood on the bank, white and still, watching something beneath the surface that only it could see. I'll come, I said. Patricia exhaled. Sunday dinner. 5 o'clock. Bring nothing. I mean it. Henry, bring nothing. I brought a pecan pie. Louise's recipe. Patricia shook her head when she saw it, but she put it on the counter next to the butter beans and the cornbread, and she didn't say another word about it. The notebook sat on the table between them, blank, spiral-bound, the kind you buy at a drugstore for $2. Dr. Carmen Torres placed it there at the start of every session the way a priest places bread on an altar. Not because the object mattered, because the ritual did. I know this because Meredith told me later. Not all of it, not at first, but enough. The Sunday dinner at Patricia's house had been quiet. Not the cold silence of Gregory's conference room. A different kind, the kind that happens when people are too full of unsaid things to risk saying the wrong one. Meredith sat across from me at Patricia's small oak table, her hands folded in her lap, her plate barely touched. Nathan sat beside her, but not close. Ellie sat next to me. James sat in Patricia's lap, picking cornbread apart with his fingers. Meredith spoke once during the meal. I'm sorry, Dad. 2 words. 3 syllables. She said them looking at the table, not at me. Her voice thin and dry, as paper held too close to a flame. I nodded. I didn't say I forgive you because I wasn't sure I did. I didn't say, it's okay, because it wasn't. I said, I heard you. And that was enough for one Sunday. Patricia served the pecan pie. James ate 2 pieces. Ellie leaned her head against my arm, and I let her stay there until her breathing slowed, and I realized she had fallen asleep. Nathan carried her to the car. Meredith stood on the porch and watched me drive away. And in the rearview mirror, she looked like someone standing at the edge of a dock after the last boat has left. Therapy began the following Tuesday. Dr. Carmen Torres, licensed marriage and family therapist, College of Charleston adjunct, office on Calhoun Street above a flower shop, had been selected by Gregory from a short list of 3. She specialized in family estrangement and financial betrayal, which, she later told me, was a niche she wished didn't exist. The first 4 sessions were Meredith alone. I didn't attend. I didn't ask what was said. Gregory received quarterly progress reports as stipulated in the agreement. And I trusted the process, the way you trust a surgeon. Not because you understand what they're doing, but because you've chosen to let them do it. What I know about those early sessions came from Meredith herself. Months later, during a joint session, I agreed to attend. She described them in fragments the way you describe a car accident, not chronologically, but in flashes of what hurt most. Session 1. Dr. Torres asked Meredith to describe her relationship with money. Meredith talked for 45 minutes without pausing. She described the years after Louise died, the fear that Henry would spend everything on grief, the anxiety of watching a man she loved become a man she couldn't control, the slow transformation of worry into strategy, and strategy into theft. She did not cry. Session 2. Dr. Torres asked about the conservatorship memo. Meredith said she had written it at 2 in the morning, alone at the kitchen table, after James had a fever and Nathan was asleep, and the house felt like it was shrinking. She said she wrote it the way someone writes a suicide note, not because they want to die, but because they need to put the fear somewhere outside their body. Session 3. Dr. Torres asked about Nathan. Meredith said she had stopped seeing him as a partner 3 years ago. He had become a witness, someone who watched her make decisions and said nothing, which she interpreted as approval. She didn't realize until the recordings that his silence was not agreement. It was evidence. Session 4. Dr. Torres asked about Louise. Meredith stopped talking. For 11 minutes, Dr. Torres counted. Meredith sat in the chair and said nothing. The notebook was open in her lap. Her pen was uncapped. She stared at the blank page the way I had stared at Louise's hospital bed the morning after she died, looking at an absence and trying to find a shape in it. Then Dr. Torres said 5 words. Write a letter to your mother. Meredith didn't write it that day. She carried the notebook home to the studio on Rivers Avenue, 500 square feet. A single window facing the parking lot. A mattress on the floor, and a folding table she'd bought at Goodwill. She put the notebook on the table and left it there for 3 days. On the 4th night, she opened it. She wrote for 2 hours. She told me this during our joint session, her voice careful, as if she were holding something breakable in her mouth. She said she started the letter 3 times. The first version was an apology. The second was an accusation. Why did you leave me? Why did you get sick? Why did you let Dad hide everything and make me guess? The third version was the one she kept. She didn't read it to me. She didn't have to. Dr. Torres told me later, with Meredith's permission, that the letter was 4 pages long, handwritten, and that it contained 3 sentences that Dr. Torres had never forgotten. I turned your name into a business plan. I turned Dad's love into a budget line. I don't know when I became this person, but I know it started the day I lost you. I don't know if that's true. Grief doesn't follow timelines, and blame doesn't follow logic, but I know this. Meredith sat alone in a 500 square foot studio in North Charleston and wrote a letter to a woman who had been dead for 6 years. And she did it not because a court ordered her to, but because a therapist handed her a $2 notebook and said 5 words that unlocked a door Meredith had welded shut. Dr. Torres called me the following week. She's ready, she said. Not healed, not even close, but ready to sit in a room with you and say things that matter. When? Next Thursday. 10 o'clock. My office. I said yes. Then I sat on the screened porch and watched the tide come in. The marsh grass bent east. The egret was back. Same bank, same stillness, same patience. I thought about Louise's letter. Not Meredith's letter to Louise. Louise's letter to me. The one she wrote 3 days before she died. Sealed in an envelope I found in her bedside drawer. Addressed in her handwriting that had grown shaky, but never uncertain. Be patient with her, Henry. She's more afraid than she's angry. She gets that from me. I had read that letter 400 times. I could recite it with my eyes closed. And for 3 years, living in Meredith's guest room, handing over $3,000 a month, watching my daughter calcify into someone I didn't recognize, I had wondered if Louise was wrong. Now, sitting on the porch, I thought maybe she was right. Maybe afraid and angry look the same from the outside, and only a mother can tell the difference. The phone rang at 6:14 on a Wednesday evening. I was on the porch, watching a pelican fold its wings and drop into the creek like a stone wrapped in feathers. The screen said Ellie Nathan's phone, but Ellie's voice. Grandpa, hey sweetheart, are you eating dinner? Not yet. Are you? We had mac and cheese. James put ketchup on his. It was disgusting. A pause. Grandpa, I made you something. I leaned back in the rocker. The marsh was turning gold. Somewhere across the island, a dog barked twice and stopped. What did you make? A drawing. But it's different from the last one. It's bigger, and it has more people. Another pause, longer this time. The kind where a child is deciding whether to say the careful thing or the true thing. It has Mom in it. I closed my eyes. Tell me about it. There's the bridge. Grandma's bridge. And there's you standing on one side, and Mom is standing on the other side. And James and me are in the middle. And Grandma is in the sky again, but this time she's not just watching, she's pointing. Like she's telling Mom to walk. I held the phone against my ear and listened to the creek. The tide was shifting. Water moved through the grass in small, quiet pulses, like a heartbeat heard through a wall. It's beautiful, Ellie. I want to give it to you. Can I give it to you? Of course. Can Mom come too? The pelican surfaced with a fish in its beak, shook once, and swallowed. The world kept moving, water, wings, light indifferent to the weight of a 10-year-old's question. Yes, I said. Mom can come too. We met on Saturday at a coffee shop on King Street, not the one near David Chen's office, but a smaller place 2 blocks south, with brick walls and ceiling fans and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. I chose it because it was neutral ground. No conference rooms, no folders, no lawyers. I arrived early, ordered black coffee, sat at a corner table near the window where I could see the street and the door simultaneously, a habit I had developed in Gregory's office and hadn't been able to shake. Meredith walked in at 9:10. She was thinner than the last time I had seen her at Patricia's dinner, not unhealthy, but reduced, as if the months since the meeting had physically subtracted something from her frame. She wore a plain white blouse and jeans. No blazer. No heels. Flats beige, scuffed at the toe. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and without makeup her face looked younger and older at the same time. Nathan came in behind her, holding James on one hip. Ellie walked between them, carrying a rolled piece of paper in both hands like a scroll. They sat down. Nathan ordered a latte. Meredith ordered water. James asked for a cookie, and Nathan said yes, before Meredith could answer a small negotiation that told me everything about where they stood. Separate. Civil. Orbiting the same children from different distances. Ellie placed the drawing on the table and unrolled it carefully, weighting the corners with a salt shaker, a sugar dispenser, Nathan's phone, and my coffee cup. The paper was large, poster-sized, the kind teachers give for special projects, colored pencil and crayon, precise for a 10-year-old's hand, certain in a way that children's art sometimes is when they are drawing something they have seen clearly in their mind. The bridge was in the center, green and arched, spanning blue water, with lampposts on each side drawn in careful yellow. On the left stood a man tall, gray-haired, wearing a brown jacket. On the right stood a woman, dark hair, smaller, her hands at her sides. In the middle of the bridge, 2 children held hands. Above them, in the sky, a woman in a yellow dress floated among clouds, one arm extended, index finger pointing toward the right side of the bridge toward the woman standing alone. At the bottom, in Ellie's handwriting, large and deliberate, "Walk to him, Mom. Grandma says it's okay." I read it twice. The coffee shop noise, the espresso machine, the door chime, a couple arguing gently about parking, continued around us as if nothing had happened. But something had. Something was happening at this table that no legal document or forensic accountant or therapist could manufacture. A child had drawn a map of forgiveness and handed it to the people who needed it most. Meredith was staring at the drawing. Her lips were pressed together. Her eyes were wet, but she was not crying, holding. The way she had held in Gregory's office. Except this time she was holding against something that wanted to come out, not something that wanted to go in. "Ellie," she whispered. "When did you draw this?" "Last week. After school. Dad helped me find the big paper." Nathan looked at me. A small nod. Not apology, acknowledgement. I helped. Because she asked. Meredith touched the edge of the drawing with her fingertip, tracing the line of the bridge from one side to the other. She stopped at the figure on the left, the man in the brown jacket. "Dad," she said. Not the thin, shrunken dad from Gregory's office. Not the automatic dad from 1,000 casual phone calls. A different one, the kind that sounds like it was carried a long distance on foot. "I know I can't undo what I did. I know the money is paid, and the terms are signed, and the bar is doing what the bar does. I know all of that." She pulled her hand back from the drawing. "But I need you to know that the money isn't why I'm here. I'm here because my daughter drew a picture of our family on a bridge, and she put Mom in the sky pointing at me. And She stopped, pressed her fingers against her eyes, breathed. "I want to walk across it. I don't know if you'll let me, but I want to try." James bit into his cookie. Crumbs fell on the drawing, landing on the bridge between the two children. Nathan brushed them off gently with the back of his hand. I looked at the drawing. Louise in the yellow dress. The finger pointing. The bridge I had built with $2.3 million. And a grief I still couldn't name. And my daughter on the other side, asking to cross. "It's not forgiveness," I said. "Not yet. I need you to understand that." "I understand. But it's a start." Meredith nodded. A single tear ran down her left cheek and landed on the table beside her water glass. She didn't wipe it. She let it sit there, small and round and honest. Ellie looked at me. Then at her mother. Then she picked up a crayon from her backpack, yellow, the same shade as Louise's dress, and drew a small sun in the upper corner of the poster she had missed. "There," she said. "Now it's finished." They finished the bridge on a Thursday in October. I know this because I was there when the last plank was bolted into place, standing on the bank of the Ashley River with my hands in my jacket pockets, watching two workers in hard hats tighten the final railing bracket while a crane lowered the dedication plaque into position. The plaque was bronze, 18 inches wide, mounted at the entrance on the east side. I had written the inscription myself, sitting on the screened porch at Sullivan's Island, with a pencil and a legal pad, crossing out words until only the right ones remained. Louise Margaret Dawson, 1958, 2019. She built people the way others build houses, with patience, with light, and with doors that never locked. The ceremony was scheduled for Saturday at 11. Gregory handled the logistics, permits, seating, the sound system, a small podium facing the river. The city of Charleston co-sponsored the event. The mayor's office sent a representative. The Post and Courier ran a short piece on Friday. Pedestrian bridge named for late Charleston resident dedicated Saturday. They mentioned the anonymous donor. They did not print my name. I preferred it that way. Saturday morning broke clear and cool. The kind of October sky that looks like someone washed it overnight. Pale blue. No clouds. The sun low and warm without heat. I drove across the bridge on James Island and parked in the grass lot beside the river. There were already 40 or 50 people milling near the entrance, neighbors, city officials, a few engineers from Dawson Engineering's old days who had heard through word of mouth. Patricia was there in a green dress, holding a mason jar of sweet tea she had brought from Somerville because she didn't trust anyone else's recipe. Gregory met me at the edge of the crowd. He wore a navy suit and no tie, the most casual I had seen him in 30 years. "You ready?" he asked. "No," I said. "But that's never stopped me." He smiled. It was the second time I had seen Gregory Hartwell smile. The first was the day I signed the original trust documents 6 years ago. When he looked at the numbers and said, "Louise would be proud of you, Henry." I believed him then. I believed him now. Nathan arrived at 10:40 with the children. Ellie wore a white dress with small yellow flowers, a detail that made my chest tighten because Louise had owned a dress with the same pattern, and I was almost certain Nathan knew that. James wore khakis and a blue button-down that was already untucked. He ran to me across the grass and wrapped his arms around my leg. "Grandpa, is that the bridge? The real bridge?" "That's the real bridge, buddy. It's huge." It wasn't huge. It was 160 feet. Single span, arched pedestrian walkway with lampposts every 20 feet and live oaks planted on both approaches. But to a 6-year-old, anything his grandfather built was enormous. And I didn't correct him. At 10:55 I saw her. Meredith came from the parking lot on the west side, the opposite bank. She walked alone. No blazer, no heels, no armor. A simple gray dress. Flats. Hair down. She stopped at the far entrance of the bridge and stood there, one hand resting on the railing, looking across the span at the crowd, the podium, the plaque, and somewhere in the middle of it all me. She didn't cross. Not yet. The ceremony began at 11. Gregory spoke first, brief, factual, the way he spoke in every room. He described the bridge as a community project funded by a private donor, built to connect the James Island Trail system to the waterfront park. He thanked the city, the contractors, the engineers. He did not mention my name. Then he introduced me. Not as the donor. As a friend of Louise's. I stepped to the podium. The microphone hummed. 50 faces looked up at me, some I knew. Most I didn't. Patricia stood in the front row, clutching her mason jar, her eyes already wet. I spoke for 3 minutes. I didn't read from notes. Louise Dawson was my wife for 34 years. She was a mother, a grandmother, a gardener, a terrible singer, and the best person I have ever known. She died on a Tuesday in April, and the world got quieter after that. Not just my world. The whole thing. A few people laughed softly. Patricia wiped her eyes. She used to say that the only thing worth building is something people can walk across to get to each other. She meant it about relationships. I took it literally. More laughter. Warmer this time. This bridge is for her. But it's also for anyone who has ever stood on one side of something and been afraid to cross. The distance isn't always far. Sometimes it's just 160 feet. Sometimes it's shorter than that, the length of a hallway, or a kitchen table, or a phone call you haven't made yet. I paused. Looked across the bridge. Meredith was still standing at the far entrance, both hands on the railing now, watching. Louise would have told you to walk. She wouldn't have told you it's easy. She would have told you it's worth it. I stepped away from the podium. The crowd applauded. Polite. Sincere. The kind of clapping that means we felt that. Gregory shook my hand. Patricia hugged me and spilled sweet tea on my jacket and didn't apologize. Ellie tugged my sleeve. "Grandpa." "Look." I looked. Meredith had stepped onto the bridge. She walked slowly. Not hesitantly, deliberately. The way you walk when every step is a sentence you've been composing for months. Her flats made no sound on the wooden planks. The lampposts cast small circles of shadow in the midday light. The river moved beneath her, wide and silver and patient. She passed the first lamppost, the second, the third. James broke free from Nathan's hand and ran onto the bridge toward her, his untucked shirt flapping behind him. Meredith knelt and caught him, lifted him onto her hip, and kept walking. Ellie looked at me. I nodded. She ran after them, white dress, yellow flowers, sneakers slapping wood, and took her mother's free hand. Meredith reached the east side of the bridge. She stopped in front of the plaque. She read the inscription. She pressed her fingers against the bronze, against her mother's name, and closed her eyes. Then she looked at me. I didn't move. I didn't need to. She had crossed. That was enough. "Hi, Dad," she said. Hi, sweetheart. James reached for me. I took him. Ellie held my hand. Meredith stood one step away, close enough to touch, far enough to respect the distance that still existed between us. The distance was real. It would take time, but the bridge was built, and she had walked across it, and Louise was watching from somewhere, I was sure of it, in a yellow dress, pointing, smiling, saying, "See? I told you. She just needed the bridge." I turned to the river. The sun sat on the water like a coin on a table. The oak trees bent their branches toward the bank. Somewhere, a church bell rang once deep, bronze, the sound carrying across the island the way good things carry. Slowly, but far. "Come on," I said. Patricia brought pie. We walked off the bridge together. Not healed, not whole, but walking. And for now, that was enough. Built with love, crossed with grace.